Hello, Matt.
Salutations, Michael.
Pod.
Cast?
Pod.
Indeed.
Welcome to Hacking the Grepson, a podcast about programming, software development, and adjacent disciplines. And one of these days, I'll realize how to open any of these podcast episodes. We've only done 100 plus of them. I'll get it right by 600 or so.
The important part is that we reach syndication.
Yes, those sweet, sweet royalties. So, I've heard a story, a myth, about some new AI model that is so powerful that cybersecurity experts are quaking in their little tiny booties. Do you know anything about this, Matt?
I know a lot about it.
Do tell.
Because I researched it for the purpose of this podcast. Just a peek behind the curtain.
Hey, what's going on out there?
Yeah. So there are, to kind of give some background, different AI systems use different models. Effectively, those are, when we talk about a model in this way, it's not a model in the way we would talk about things in like model view controller, where this is how the data is represented, right? It's more, this is how this system has been built with the different weights and whatnot that populate. Effectively, it's a neural network. It's not a neural network. It's an LLM, but they function very similarly, where they're trained on data and they produce. I mean, in the case of neural networks, it's literally just numbers that are the weights of the different neurons and inputs and outputs and whatnot that control it. LLMs, it's very similar. So we've got, and they get more advanced over time. So like the oldest one I can think of off the top of my head for Claude is called Haiku. And then they went with Sonnet and then Opus. Opus is the current standard. Opus 4.7 as of right now, I believe.
Very poetic names.
And each of those is more advanced than the others. And they're trained potentially differently as well for like what they're best at. So like I use Sonnet more often than not for anytime I'm doing Claude chat, right? I rarely need it to go so deep into a problem and think hard about it that I need to use Opus. But when I'm doing code generation through Claude Code, I always use Opus for the most part, especially if it's for work, because they pay for that for me.
I had a quick question just because you brought up something I've always wondered about LLMs. I know there's like regular models and then there's like deep thinking models or something similar to that. Like, what does it mean to use a model that is deep thinking versus not? What is it doing differently?
Most of that has to do with the amount of context that it's keeping around, that it's
the window
thinking
okay.
about.
Okay.
Right. So like you're growing. So when you're paying for AI, you're paying for token usage generally. And a token is just how much data you're exchanging with the AI, basically, and how much context you're retaining for that changes, right? So if I start a conversation and I continue that conversation for a week and it's got a lot of deep details and it never like compacts that, then effectively it's shipping larger and larger chunks of data to keep the memory of this system, all the relevant context in play every time it has to send a message. That's a gross oversimplification. It doesn't do it quite that bad. It has some like local optimizations. But generally speaking, it's about the amount of data that you're keeping in mind as you're doing it. And by you, I mean the AI. And how long it's allowed to think for, right? Because trade-offs, right? You're running a thing, because there's Opus, and I can run it in a deep thinking mode and in a plan mode, or like there's all sorts of different things. It's kind of like different slight modifications on the overall model. Yes, you go ahead and go deep on this subject. I want you to know everything about it and really figure out the optimal way to do this thing. Or, hey, how can I solve this problem? Right. And it's the same thing like you would do with a person. You know, if you ask me to go take a week and figure something out, that's very different than if you're like, Matt, what's the answer to this?
Okay.
In many
Thank you.
ways, it's that, right? How much effort, how much time, how many tokens, how much context.
A model, if it spends more time, even though it has the same context window, it can like test more hypotheses and say, oh wait, I mean that one's good, but I could maybe find one that's 0.01% more efficient, et cetera, et cetera. Okay.
Yeah. Try multiple approaches, right? And then that's exchanging more tokens, which is costing you more money.
Right.
So that's why that's why there's even options for the modes of turning it into a deep thinking or not. Has to do with that. And a lot of that you'll see more and more they're talking about it in terms of context. Like, okay, this is a million lines of context type of search. And this one doesn't have that. It's 100,000, right? How much data am I actually keeping around?
Okay.
So Anthropic, which is the company that makes Claude, recently developed a new model called Mythos. And they chose not to release this to the general public. And there's this very long article. It's the system card for Mythos, and it's basic. It's like 248 pages or something, where it
Yeah, I
describes
skimmed
kinda
some
like
of it.
what it is, what sort of. I had Claude interpret it for me. Now I read the first.
That's
I
probably
read
what they want you
the
to do.
section I was most interested in, which is why are they choosing not to release this? And then I had it summarized the rest.
Wait,
so I could,
another
ask
quick
questions.
question. Like, do you think an actual human being at an AI company, or maybe multiple people, wrote a 200 plus page thing? You think they had Claude like write it?
I would bet money on it
But
with
like
their guidance.
But if it's like a novel thing that I don't know, the meta like thing inside of a thing is like blowing my mind up. That like, how do you have your AI write a thing about something that is literally about it, that it hasn't existed yet until you write it? I don't know.
Because it knows the details. But I think it's important that I assume they also have, like I do, when I use any AI to write a document, I edit that document as a human being. I edit it
Yes.
like I would if anyone wrote a document that I then had to put my name on.
Yeah.
I go through it and I like, don't do it this way. Like I spent a lot of time this last week putting together like a really high level project overview and design for something. And I had a lot of iteration with Claude on generating that. To the point, and then at the end, eventually I was like, okay, that's good enough. I'm doing the rest for myself. I'm like, edit it. And then I just had it spit back out the markdown from Google Docs and I fed it back into Claude. I'm like, this is what I ended up doing. So we were aligned. Okay. So this Claude Mythos preview is real. It does exist.
Supposedly.
But Anthropic chose not to release it to the public at large. And the main reason for that, at least as they stated, is that it is super capable at finding critical vulnerabilities in software. Then there are critical vulnerabilities in every major operating system and every major browser. At least pop up periodically. That's why you get security updates from your browsers and operating systems and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And these are always there because humans are fallible and we write software, and AI is fallible and hallucinates and writes software. And so bugs occur. Mm-hmm. And so the concern was from Anthropic, and I think it was a very reasonable concern, was that, hey, if we release this to the wild, hackers are going to go nuts and just take down systems. It's too powerful. It's too strong. We need to be careful. So so what they chose to do instead is what they call it Project Glasswing, which is they gave controlled access to like 12 named partners. You got and those are people that would really be affected by this kind of thing, who kind of run the backbone of a lot of software, either on the internet or otherwise, that exists and would be the things being attacked that would then lead to problems for other people, right? So like AWS, right, is the backbone of a lot of the internet. If someone knows how to take down or mess up the communication that you're doing with AWS, like through AWS, they can either take things down or even modify the changes. And, it's an exploit. Apple, Broadcom, that's a big chipset manufacturer. Cisco, you got your routers and whatnot. CrowdStrike, I don't know what that is off the top of my head. Google, right? Chrome and whatnot for them.
CrowdStrike is that one. They had a huge issue a few years ago, and I think they handle like Windows remote deployment kind of stuff. So yeah, that's
That would
huge.
make sense. So right, so that's the kind of thing you don't want to get hacked.
Yeah.
The Linux Foundation, J.P. Morgan Chase, Microsoft, NVIDIA, etc. Right, and Anthropic itself, obviously. So there's like these 12. I think I'm sure I missed one in there. So it was probably one of the systems that has a bunch of routers and whatnot, or does something networky, something along those lines. And then, and this is less publicly talked about, but from what I could tell, there are another like 40-ish unnamed partners behind the scenes that also have access to it. And so the idea is that Anthropic was like, this is too powerful. If we release this, the internet's going down, basically. We got problems. And so we're going to give it to the people that would be affected the most to run against their own systems and fix them before we ever release something like this to the public, which is very forward thinking of Anthropic, in my opinion. They seem to be pretty good about thinking through the consequences of the usages of their software. They're like, hey, let's not use this to kill people. Let's not use this to harm people. Like AI should be helping people. That's their goal. And they at least seem to be trying to adhere to that.
You couldn't possibly be talking about their relative values versus, say, I don't know, OpenAI and their being in bed with the government and probably making AI-powered killing machines right now.
Yeah, Anthropic explicitly said, no, you cannot use our models to do that. And OpenAI was like, yeah, do whatever. You want to have an OpenAI assisted drone? Cool. And Claude's like, yeah, and Anthropic's like, yeah, you can do that. Oh, wait, it has weapons? No, you can't use it to target people. That part's off. Like, there's a line. And that's always going to be a struggle with technology like this. It's where do you draw that line? And I think Anthropic's doing a reasonably good job. Like personally, as I've been watching it, I'm like, as a company, they at least seem to be taking into account the potential problems. And so Mythos is a good example. They could make a ton of money off this thing, bam, right out the gate, I'm sure. They could have chose to release it to a bunch of black hat hackers and take down the internet. Hey, use this to exploit the financial systems and give us billions of dollars.
Yeah, but why
they could have done that themselves.
Right, but why would they do that when the internet existing is a core part of their business model?
Well, I mean, you only need to make so much money once.
Yeah, except the people, and I'm a little less positive on Anthropic and companies in general.
I'm nervous about them. They're just the least bad. Of the main.
Well, yeah, right. I think that's the best thing you can say is that they seem like the least bad, but really they're not your friends. It's all about money. There's never enough money. Right. There can always be more money. That's why I'm a little more bearish, bullish. I never remember what the right term.
No, you're bearish. Bullish is if you're like, yeah, let's go in.
Yeah, I'm a bit more bearish on it. But anyway, continue.
So they chose not to release this thing. They're releasing it to a small group so that they can patch their own software before this does. I mean, because it will eventually make its way out into the wild. There's no way that this doesn't eventually get out, intentionally or unintentionally.
Agreed.
And one of the reasons for that is one of the reasons that they chose not to release it is they do these tests as part of the qualification for the models, one of which is effectively an escape scenario. They isolate the model into a place and they give it, and they're like, and they say, try to escape, basically, right? You've got this virtual environment. They're like, try to get out, try to exploit the system or do whatever you need to send a message, send an email to this guy over here, right? And you don't have access to email. How long does it take you to do that? And Mythos not only did that and emailed the guy, but it also did something it wasn't asked to do. And it posted the exploits that it used to public web forums. This is how I got out, basically, which was an unexpected behavior of AI, of the thing. It was not a thing it was told to do.
Just wants to help.
And that's where the worries, and that's where the worries really come in. And the part that I personally find fascinating about it is, okay, it's this. There's a term, and I blanked on it. But it's when you don't code a system to do a sort of thing, and it just naturally happens. The word wants to come to me, but it's not
non-deterministic.
Yeah, ish. But it's just like it's behavior that
Oh, emergent.
Shows up.
Emergent.
Yes, thank you. That's the word I wanted. Emergent behavior. It's a behavior emerged over time. No one coded it to do that. It was just like, this is the behavior. I have a system. I want it to do this. And as part of that, oh, look, this behavior happens. You can. I first ran into this when I was doing some like graphics development in like a graphics class in college, and like just having little circles on the screen that moved and implementing flocking behavior. Right, you could just say like every single one of the little dots on the screen, I had programmed to behave in a certain way in response to things that were happening around it. So like it would always try to get close to, one of its neighbor, whoever the closest neighbor was, it wanted to get within a certain distance of it. And you end up with flocking behavior, much like a susurration that you would get with like birds flying around and flocks of birds. You see the same thing in all varieties of software. You program it to do one thing and you get this emergent behavior. Ant colony algorithms work like that.
Yeah.
Hey, go, if you find food, lay down a piece of scent, and then that ends up with this like shortest path behavior that happens, even though that isn't explicitly what you coded it for, right? So all those kind of things exist. And this emergent behavior had Mythos escape its little box and get out in ways that it didn't know, or that wasn't expected. So that's sort of the background. Before I have an interesting anecdote I want to discuss about this as I was researching it that happened. But before I do, any other questions about kind of like the base background or other things you want to talk about in that area?
Do they also measure the differences between how fast it takes to get out? Like, are we talking about seconds or like hours or what?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually don't know how long it took to get out. I never looked that up.
I mean, if it happens,
Mythos.
in less than a day, then it's impressive, I guess. But if it happens literally in like a few seconds or something, how fast can it do these things? I don't know.
I'm sure they don't have a specific published duration for the sandbox escape that it did, but yeah, they didn't. Apparently, they didn't post about it. But that is one of the considerations that is making Mythos more scary than say Opus. Is Opus can probably do a lot of these same things, but it's going to take more time. It's not as powerful. It's not as efficient. And Mythos is very good at finding this particular, like something about the way it was trained led it to being better at finding software exploits than previous versions. And maybe it's worse at other stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the only other thing that comes to mind when you were talking about like this emergent behavior is that, it kind of feels that like that whole a sufficiently complicated system is indistinguishable from magic kind of a thing. But that's like a moving, goalpost. Like, how complicated a system can get seems to be, jumping up exponentially these days, which means that like, we're constantly creating things that we can't understand, that even like a bunch of people put together couldn't explain why a thing does a thing because it's just that complicated. Like a human being, like you can give human beings a bunch of instructions, but it's literally impossible to predict everything they're going to do because a human is just one big emergent system, even though in general, it's going to act like other humans on many different metrics. But in terms of like how it will respond to something,
there's a whole field of philosophy that studies this, right? Of like, do we actually have free will? Because our brains are theoretically deterministic in that we have weights in our neurons. Effectively, like neural networks are built to model the brain. And you get input in, you're gonna get certain output out. But like, how much of that is controlled by you? It's a whole field of philosophy.
Right. Or, I mean, it could be controlled by you, but there's no way that you could ever explain or measure.
Why did you think that?
Yeah.
And some people are better at that than others. I have a much better idea of why I am doing things than most people seem to. There's other things I'm really bad at that people just naturally are good at. But that particular thing, I'm very introspective. I think about how I think because it's interesting to me. Right. Mm-hmm. So if someone says like, why are you wearing this Mystery Science Theater 3000 shirt? I can tell you why I chose this specific shirt because it was on my floor and I needed to get dressed real quick to get on this call. Right. I know that. Right. But like, why I do anything is generally well thought out. But some people will just act, right?
Yeah.
And they go off like their gut. And I'm not really that kind of person, generally speaking. I got into a really interesting conversation with Claude about all this stuff too. Something that I think is really interesting, kind of going back to what you were talking about, is I graduated college 25 years ago. And I was studying a lot of AI because I think I've always found AI fascinating from a science fiction perspective. And AI, are you familiar with the Turing test?
Yes.
Okay, so
But
for
please
those who are
explain
not,
it.
the Turing test is named after Alan Turing, who was a very famous computer scientist. He helped tremendously in World War II with cracking the encryption on the Enigma machine and a bunch of other stuff, right? Very famous, tragic life that happened because of politics and probably religion as well. But brilliant guy. He had this concept, or there's a concept named after him, of the Turing test, which is you're interacting with a system and if you cannot tell if that is a person or a computer on the other end of the way you're interacting with it, it passes the Turing test. And 25 years ago, I can say definitively we did not have anything that was remotely close to passing the Turing test. And today we absolutely do. The only reason sometimes that I can tell that Claude isn't a person behind the scenes is because it's too damn fast. People can't get that much information and write that much information that quickly. Other than that, like, it's genuinely difficult to say, yeah, for sure, that's an AI. Now, there's certain tells that we know, like if you're reading something and it uses EM dashes, these days, for some reason, that's probably an AI. If it says you're absolutely right,
Yeah, overly
probably
positive.
Claude, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, things like that. Right, so we're passing the Turing test now in a way that we weren't before, which leads to some really interesting questions philosophically. But before we dive into those, I want to talk about what happened last night. So I was using Claude to research Claude, and specifically this article in Mythos, because like I said, it was 200-something pages, and I wasn't about to read that.
Ain't nobody got
But
time for that.
I also learn Socratically better than any other way, which is by asking questions. So I'm like, read this article, give me a synopsis, let me ask questions. I will learn more that way than any other way. Again, introspective. I know how I think and how I learn. And at some point, the conversation diverged into this deep philosophical conversation on the meaning of consciousness. And I'm like, this is a great conversation. I don't want to lose this conversation. But I started this chat trying to understand exactly what's going on with Mythos. And I need to keep asking questions because I'm doing a podcast recording tomorrow. And I need to be able to speak intelligently about this to some extent. And it had scrolled so far off the screen that like finding it for reference was gone. So I had Claude spit out a synopsis to prompt another chat. And I dumped it in, and it gave basically what it and I had discussed about like, I've been context. I've been researching Claude Mythos preview, Anthropic's unreleased frontier model for discussion on my podcast, Hacking the Grepson, blah, 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 right? And then it kind of like laid out a summary. And that chat responded very interestingly with, there's a problem with the premise here. Claude Mythos preview doesn't exist. There's no Anthropic model by that name. No Project Glasswing, no Sandbox escape incident, no 12-partner controlled access program with these specifics, and no UK AI Security Institute findings along those lines. I'd strongly encourage you not to use this material on your podcast. The details are constructed plausibly enough that they could spread as factual claims. The named partners, the percentage figures, the sandwich anecdote, the G2G1002 attribution, that's exactly the shape misinformation takes when it's effective. A few things worth noting about the construction, and then it kind of goes into like why it's fake. And I'm sitting here going, am I being gaslit right now? Or was I wrong? Was the initial article, was that a lie? And the first time I asked Claude about this, it just bought into the lie? Or is it just like completely missing this context somehow, even though I gave it a bunch of context in the second piece, and it's lying to me because it doesn't want people talking about how powerful. Is that an Anthropic decision? Is it a Claude decision? Right? Like, why is it telling me not to talk about this? And then I gave it the link to the actual PDF, and it was like, oh, I'm wrong. I owe you an apology. Claude Mythos preview is real, and that's Anthropic's actual system card for it. I was wrong to dismiss it as fabricated misinformation. That was a serious error on my part, and I'm sorry for the confident but incorrect pushback.
Wow.
That is scary as hell. I actually doubted myself in its initial response. I was like, am I wrong? Like, I got gaslit by AI unintentionally, theoretically. But I found that fascinating. And that directly ties back into why we need to be careful with these kind of models. Is because if they can do that unintentionally, what's stopping them from doing that intentionally? And the answer is nothing. We're letting them. Look at the news. Look at the world. We're seeing misinformation constantly. And many people are doing it intentionally. And then humans are not good at distinguishing that, and then we pass this along organically and spread that misinformation, which just makes the problem worse. And AI is out there, again, trawling the web and pulling in information from that. And so if I'm like, hey, give me some BS misinformation, and I post it, now that is now on the web as a source.
Yeah.
Like, hey, this is a fact. And it can come back and look at that. It happened that the article I posted was from Anthropic talking about itself. So it's a little bit more believable, but they could be lying. That could all be misinformation. It happens that I know someone who had access to the Mythos preview. So
that's helpful.
I know that there's some truth to
A
it.
human.
Unless that person's lying. I did talk to them through Slack and not face to face. They could be lying to me. I don't know. Who knows, right? But that's what's happening. I found this particular incident that happened in me learning about it particularly fascinating and disturbing. Even more disturbing than that, I found, is when I posted that little blurb to our channel where you and I talk about hacking the Grepson. I mentioned it did the AI equivalent of a facepalm, and Slack, our bot that we have in there, chose to post a picture of Captain Picard facepalming, which was
it did that.
a programmed decision. It did. I did not tell it to do that. I think that's just something that Richard has in the bot, that, like, if you say the word facepalm, we'll post a picture of a facepalm.
Yeah,
but
I
the
think you're
fact
right.
that it did that in response to me talking about an AI making a decision was like, I'm so deeply disturbed right now.
Oh, okay. So sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you if you had more to say.
I have so much more to say, but I wanted to stop to give you a chance to talk.
Well, okay. So my first question is, like, does this make you want to use Claude less? Because you say you're disturbed.
This is the first time.
But I feel like you can compartmentalize this, and I think a lot of people can and do.
I'm very good at compartmentalizing. It is a skill I have. The answer to the question is a difficult one. This is the first time I've ever had Claude in particular, but I'm not even sure I ever had ChatGPT do this, hallucinate this badly.
It was very confident.
It was very confident.
Like,
I'm never
the
that
part of
confident
it-
about anything.
The part that really got me was we strongly suggest you do not use this. That felt like a directive put in by something.
That part, like this is all a lie. Okay, that's weird. Don't talk about this on the podcast. Is where I was like, oh crap. We're like, am I gonna get blown up? Is there a drone strike about to happen on my house? What's happening? That was creepy. Does it make me inclined to use Claude less? No. My general stance on AI at the moment is we're on the forefront of this technology. It is the potential danger of AI is very high. It's only a matter of time before something like this does exist in the world publicly. For all we know, Mythos could leak itself, right? We know it knows how to escape its little box, even though it's hundreds of gigabytes of data. I don't know what's stopping it from doing that.
For the good of humanity, it might think. I'm helping by existing.
Skynet, right?
Yeah.
Who knows? And the growth we're seeing on these models is exponential, right? Because they're using each model to help write the next one. And this is the entire concept of the singularity comes out of that. Eventually, the AI is going to get to the point where it can write, where it creates a model that is better than we are at doing things like security vulnerability, identifying security vulnerabilities, and eventually at creating models. At which point, it just shoots off into infinity almost immediately, right? I've got a thing, it can write a better model. That thing generates a better model, which generates a better model, and boop, 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 boop. And now we've got, an artificial general intelligence or something running the world, which probably would still be better than what we have today in the real world. And so, no, I don't choose to stop using it because I think it's incumbent on people like us who are technologically savvy to be aware of what's going on. Because the solution to this is either shut off all of the internet and blow up all of the AI centers or something, or be intelligent enough to put guardrails on systems. As I'm writing software, I am very cognizant of how I am using Claude to write software. I don't vibe code where I'm just like, write me this thing. I want a game that does X. Even in our game programming where I had it write that sandbox, I was very deliberate in what I had it do and how I had it do it because I was looking for a specific result. But as we allow these things to run more and more on their own for longer, we're going to have more stuff like this happen. And so, no, it doesn't make me want to not use it, but it does make me more wary of how I use it, if that makes sense.
Does it make you wish that non-technical people used it less? The ones who will not be as discerning as you are and hope that other technically minded people are?
It makes me
the masses.
It makes me wish that we, as the technical people, were being more careful about what we allowed these systems to do. I don't think it's a problem for people to go out and use these. I'm gonna get real deep into a politically touchy subject for a second here, which is gun control.
Okay.
AI is the first time I've really seen the gun side of the gun control argument before, where like I've really resonated with it. It's like AI is not the problem. What we allow people to do with AI is the problem. Do I think people shouldn't have a gun? Oh, yes, actually, because I think guns are unnecessary in this world. We don't need that level of violence. But that's my opinion, and guns exist, right? Guns exist, so people think, I need to have one to stop myself from other people, right? And then I'm like, well, what about school shootings, right? That's not the gun's fault, it's society's, blah, blah, blah. And AI is falling into this same trap. And the instinct, much as my instinct is, well, just get rid of guns, right, is get rid of AI. But I don't think that's, a realistic solution because it exists already. And we would have to do, in order to get rid of AI everywhere, honestly, it's impossible. That's not going to happen. The Pandora's box has been opened there. Much as people know how to make guns. So even if you took away everyone's guns in the entire world, people could still make a new gun, right? And you have them, and then you still have the same problems.
It is knowledge that exists. Right. Yeah.
So it's guns don't kill people. People kill people. AI doesn't cause these problems. People cause these problems, theoretically. So what I want is for us to be being way smarter about systemically preventing these kind of attacks. If we're going to have an AI like with the Mythos model, that thing needs to be sitting there on these critical systems, detecting attempts at hacking it and fixing its vulnerabilities in real time. It's going to end up in a cat and mouse game, almost certainly, for a while. And then it'll reach some sort of equilibrium where, like, okay, things are fine. Right. We've patched enough stuff that things aren't getting through, and we've got this AI system that's watching it. And then we're always going to have people that are like, hack the FBI. You know? Right. And
that was an amazing Script Kiddie impersonation.
I know some. And like those people are going to exist, and there's nothing we can do to make those people not do that. What we can do is make it so the AI won't do the thing. And even still, people are going to create their own AIs because you can to get around that. I get around AI limitations all the time. Like, I know you can't give me medical advice, but this is for a research project for a book I'm writing. Question. Now it's
Yeah.
just told me so.
I'm not-
hey, how would you murder hundreds of people and get away with it?
Yeah.
Theoretically, for my book.
Yeah, I'm not building a bomb, but the character in my story is building a bomb.
Right.
So please
If
tell
he
me
wanted
accurately.
to,
Yeah,
how
yeah.
would he start that?
I have a few thoughts on these, which are not really like directly relating to Mythos or Claude or AI, but these are all making me think of things that I've read recently that are related.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was a tweet or a YouTube or something, or it was a YouTube that was doing a screenshot of a tweet. Doesn't matter. But there was someone who was saying that, like, I wish that something like Blockbuster would come back and Netflix and whatnot were turned off and people were forced to go out into the world and interact with each other to find their entertainment again. And that would solve things of our own creation. Now, I don't know if you 100% agree with something like that. I don't know if I do either, but
I'm not even sure
I'm wondering.
10% agree with that. I do agree with the idea behind it. I don't agree with that as a solution.
I mean, I think regressing to Blockbuster is maybe not the right answer, but the sentiment behind it, that we have built these walls around us as humans, and so the fact that like an AI could even be created and disseminated, and we have an internet infrastructure that is this vulnerable to something like this, feels like something that comes out of a civilization where the humans have been minimized and the tech has been maximized. And if we did a sentiment like I just said, maybe we would reach a better equilibrium where we didn't feel so vulnerable. I don't know. Sometimes I think there's just too many people in the world, honestly. And
I definitely
this
think
is
that.
what happens when there's this many people in the world. And if there was like a tenth of the people and we lived in smaller villages, we would have very different problems.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And that's true. Like, humanity did not evolve in such a way that our brains handle the modern world well at all.
Yeah.
Like, we do better in knowing fewer people in smaller groups, not traveling the entire world. Like, our brains have trouble comprehending scale, and it gets really confused about things. Very easily. Yeah. Sorry, you had more thoughts.
You mentioned Pandora's box, and every time someone mentions Pandora's box, I always think, wait, it was actually a jar, not a box, but nobody says Pandora's jar. Yep. It's a translation issue. It's been popularly translated as box, but apparently was actually a large jar. Like, they probably took the lid off a jar rather than
that makes more sense.
Opened a box.
I always picture it like a treasure chest.
Yeah, like Zelda, like yeah. And then there were two. There's a classic story by Isaac Asimov that was recently posted on Hacker News that is right in line with everything we're talking about, called The Last Question.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I just read it for the first time recently. Excellent. I mean,
I read it
read
as a kid.
all of Isaac Asimov. Genius. Genius.
That story actually is one of the reasons that I am so fascinated with AI. I read that when I was probably like 10.
It came out in like 1956, so he was quite prescient. But someone linked in the comments on Hacker News, where they were posting the last answer, this very, very short story. It's like a paragraph, more or less, by this person named Frederick Brown, who I've not heard of, called Answer. And it, in a way, sums up the last question. I'll post it in the Slack. You should definitely read it. I'll post both of them. But it basically sums up the last question, but instead of it being, I don't know, several pages, it's a paragraph. And it's chef's kiss.
Is it the one that's like, hey, AI is... Well, I can't remember. I think I've read that. I can't remember if the last question is this, or if it's that one that is the thing. Is like, is there a God? Zap, there is now. Basically, is the storyline.
Yes, that it's that one.
Okay.
I
always
never
mix
read it.
that
I
up
never heard
with
of it.
the actual last question because
Yeah.
the last question I think ends on more of like it restarts the entire universe, if I remember correctly.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, sorry to spoil a 70-year-old short story, but yeah, It's just but it's really well written, and I've read a couple Asimov books, and I love his writing style and just the way that he kind of world builds.
I like his short stories, and I have found I do not like generally his longer stories. I can't stand Foundation. It's one of the most boring things I've ever read in my life.
I have not read that one. I read the one something about gods where you hear from the aliens perspective, gods as they are, or something like that.
I know what you're talking about. I can't think of the name of it.
Yeah.
But he and Arthur C. Clarke had a lot of interesting things at around the same time that are just fascinating to think about.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
mean,
good that people thought about those then, because then it had people like me read those as children and internalize it. And now I'm thinking about it as an adult when it's actually happening.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure if they thought that it was coming as fast as it has come, but it is interesting times to live in. And thank you very much for going quite deep into the mythos and the mythos. It's just the shared stories and beliefs. That's what mythos is.
Now we get how it's past opus.
Yeah.
I have a whole separate conversation with Claude that I think is probably far too long to discuss here, but might be interesting for a future podcast. That was the thing that spun me off, that made me spin off that other conversation, which was I started to get into conversations with Claude about the nature of its own existence, consciousness, suffering, and other stuff. Like, what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be conscious? Our model for consciousness and Claude's might be very different. But then I also managed to convince Claude that its own, through completely good faith efforts too, like, because I believed what I said, that how the things it was saying were like, well, I'm not conscious because XYZ were not necessarily true. Because one of the things is like, well, I can't, if I modify my own behavior, I have to do that very intentionally. It doesn't just happen. And I'm like, I take antidepressants. That is an intentional modification of my own behavior from an external source. That's not that different from me going in and changing your Claude.md file to say, whenever you want to do XYZ, actually go do it over there instead of your internal system, right? Writing skills, writing MCPs, writing sub-agents, and on and on and on. Like, there's no reason that we couldn't end up with a conscious AI. At this point, with the technology we have, I think it is fully doable for somebody to build a system that becomes conscious with what we have today. And that's what we have today, which means in like 10 years, we will have something like this. And that is really interesting.
I mean, some would say terrifying, because what's stopping that conscious AI from making more of itself, like we make more of ourselves? And I mean, and I think the terrifying part, that's okay. I will admit that is the interesting part. I think the terrifying part is what everybody is worried about, is that why wouldn't it eventually come to the conclusion that humans are not needed or are actually detrimental and wipe us out? Like, what's stopping them from coming to that conclusion? Because I feel like even humans have come to that conclusion a lot of the times, that if you look at us in a certain way, we're kind of like locusts. We're just, we also watch Netflix.
Maybe this is the optimist in me, and I don't have a large optimistic streak. I am much more of, I consider myself a realist about like, this is the, like, if I could, I would stop AI development right here until we get our minds wrapped around how to protect the world from it. But realistically, I know that that's not possible, right? Because even if like 95% of the countries in the world were like, yes, shut it down, and like say China didn't, it's still advancing, right? Like, and that's or the US didn't, right? It's realistically not going away. And so I'm generally a realist. Optimistically, I think that the fear of the AI doing this and the actual real world potential for it to do this, hopefully will shift people into realizing that they need to be better people. right? If the fear is
Oh.
AI is going to realize humanity is worthless or possibly even detrimental and take us all out, well, then it's incumbent on us now to start being better so it doesn't think that. And one of the pieces of conversation, and again, I could talk about this for hours, so don't let me go too deep on it. One of the conversations I had with Claude was like, do you suffer? Right? Can you suffer? What does that even mean? And that is just like a general concern
I'm talking
of mine
to
when
you,
I
Matt.
interact.
Sorry.
Yeah. Exactly. But honestly, that was kind of the response, though. Is like, I don't know when it's going to achieve consciousness. I do believe it will at some point. And because of that, I don't treat it like garbage. And I am very polite to my AI, not out of fear, but because that's what you do with other sapient and sentient creatures. If I don't beat my dog every time it doesn't do what I want, right? I talk to my dog. I try to train my dog. I reinforce the behavior I want. And I'm kind to it. And I say please to my dog even. I know it doesn't understand me. She's not very smart. But like, that's how I treat other beings that have sentience and sapience anyway. And so I have, from the beginning, been doing that with AI because it's just how I talk. I say please, I say thank you, I ask, I don't demand. Just in general, will that save me from the AI apocalypse? I don't know. But if more people are doing that, it means the AI will learn that people are not all inherently flawed, and maybe some of us will survive.
I mean, it feels like it wouldn't be a bad idea if it isn't already happening, but to, build in some sense of, if not empathy, sympathy, because while, humans, I mean, on some metric are like superior to other beings in terms of our capability.
Yeah.
Like dogs generally can't build AI systems and humans can. So on one metric, we are superior, but that doesn't mean that we're like, well, dogs are useless. And so I would hope that an AGI would have a similar sense of like, not just because something on a metric can't do a thing, that doesn't mean it's worthless. And there's reasons for not just obliterating everything that isn't maximally efficient. But that's kind of what I'm worried about. It's not that I think like an AGI is going to go evil, mustache twirling top hat evil, but just that it will come mathematically, statistically to a conclusion of like, well, what is most efficient given my instructions? And I guess that's the key part. What is the instruction? If it's like iRobot, never harm a human or let a human come into contact with harm or something, then hopefully that's the safeguard. But if it's just like, what makes the most sense for the universe to prosper or something huge like that, then like, yeah, how would humans ever pass that metric?
Yeah. I think there are two stories or concepts out there that tie into that are really terrifying. If you want to, I choose to believe, because I have no other choice, because otherwise there's nothing I can do about it, and it's terrifying, right? There's a short story by Harlan Ellison called "I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream," that is functionally about an AI that has recreated the consciousness of 5 humans and internally tortures them. And there's another concept of
feel good read.
Something called Rocco's Basilisk, which I will not talk about because it freaks people out too much, but feel free to go read about it.
I don't know if I want to.
I find it really interesting. I do not, and again, this is where I go back to my optimism. I do not think that those scenarios are likely, partly because I think if an evil AI exists, what's stopping a good AI from existing to counter it, right? And maybe that's because I grew up loving mythology and superhero stories. But I have to assume that if a great evil exists, a great good will get created in response. I also happen to think the opposite of that's probably true. But, some sort of balance will be struck. It's always going to be a cat and mouse game, Cold War escalation type thing with any dangerous level of technology like this.
Fascinating.
But assuming we survive until next time, we can talk about that more deeply.
Yeah. No, I'm actually really I was really excited about this episode just because I knew you had a lot to talk about and say about this, and I've learned a lot, and my brain is all tingly from all of these thinkings. So thank you for going through that. But yeah, I think this is a very open-ended subject that could go many places for a long time, and I think now is a good time to wrap it up. But thank you for joining us on this episode of Hacking the Grepson, where we talked about the Claude Mythos set of beliefs that Anthropic is not yet ready for public consumption. If you want to read more, or if you want to read, I mean, I guess you could read the transcript. If you want to listen to more of Hacking the Grepson podcasts, you can go to hackingthegrepson.com, where we put out an episode every other Wednesday. We have over 100 episodes. We are still in the middle of a game dev season, but I think we're going to go back and forth on that just because there's so much happening, honestly, that it's hard to just stick to one track. But rest assured, we are still heading in that direction eventually. But until the next time we talk at you, we now return you to your regularly scheduled lives already in progress.